Claude Code might have a new problem, and it is not that another agent is smarter, it is that another agent is cheaper to multiply. Ante is claiming 7 times lower peak memory than Claude Code, 9 times lower average CPU, and about 5 times less disk I/O on the same 20 parallel task workload. That is not a small optimization. That is the kind of number that changes what an AI coding agent is supposed to be, because right now most people still think of a coding agent as one premium assistant sitting inside one terminal. You ask it for a feature, it reads files, it edits code, it runs tests, it explains what happened. That model is already useful, but it is also tiny. The real fight is what happens when you do not want one agent. You want 10 or 20 or 100, one agent fixing a bug, one agent writing tests, one agent reviewing the diff, one agent checking docs, one agent trying the local model, one agent watching the server, one agent cleaning up the mess when the first 5 agents did something questionable. That future does not work if every agent comes with the appetite of a desktop app, a pile of runtime baggage, and a disk usage pattern that starts to look like a denial of service attack against your own machine. This is why Ante plus Qwen is interesting. Not because it magically proves Claude Code is dead, it does not. Claude Code was faster in Ante's own resource benchmark, that matters. But the question this raises is nastier. What if the next coding agent war is not won by the smartest agent? What if it is won by the agent you can afford to run 50 times at once? That is the uncomfortable part, because once Qwen is good enough and Ante is light enough, the expensive part of AI coding stops being only the model. It becomes the harness, the runtime, the overhead, the memory, the CPU, the amount of useless disk churn you're paying for before the model even does the work. And if that sounds boring, it is exactly why it matters. The boring layer is where the cost hides. Hey, don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this. Now back to the video. The headline number is ridiculous, so let us pin it down. Antigma says it ran the same 20 tasks in parallel through Ante, Claude Code, and OpenCode. Each one ran inside Docker, same constraints, same workload. CPU, memory, and disk usage were recorded through the run, and the result is a kind of table that looks fake until you read the rows. Peak memory for Ante was 1,968 MB. Claude Code peaked at 13,877 MB. That is roughly 7 times higher. Average CPU for Ante was 1.3%. Claude Code averaged 12.1%. That is roughly 9 times higher. Total disk writes for Ante were 2,785 megabytes. Claude Code wrote 15,116 megabytes. That is where the 5 times disk I/O claim comes from, and the disk reads are even stranger. Ante read 24 megabytes. Claude Code read 17,444 megabytes. 24 megabytes versus 17.4 gigabytes, that is not a rounding error. That is not a theme setting. That is architecture showing up on the bill. Now, the caveat is important. Claude Code finished the workload in 627 seconds. Ante took 940 seconds. So if your whole world is one developer, one terminal, one task, one impatient afternoon, Claude Code still has a very obvious advantage. Speed matters, waiting matters. Nobody wants to win a memory benchmark while losing the afternoon. But that is the wrong lens for why this is interesting. The point is not that Ante wins every category. The point is that Ante changes the unit economics of agent work. Claude Code looks excellent when the unit is one powerful assistant. Ante starts looking dangerous when the unit is a swarm. And that word matters because Antigma is not hiding the thesis. Ante is built as a small Rust binary with no runtime dependencies. The product idea is not just, here's another terminal agent. The idea is that an agent should be cheap enough to replicate. If each instance is heavy, parallel agents are a luxury. If each instance is light, parallel agents become a design pattern. That is the shift. Most people are going to compare this to Claude Code in the most boring possible way. They will ask, is Ante better? That is too vague to be useful. Better at what? Better at fixing one hard bug? Better at moving through a large repo? Better at avoiding tool mistakes? Better at running offline? Better at staying cheap when you launch 20 copies? Those are different questions. And this is where Qwen changes the story. Qwen is not just another open model family sitting on Hugging Face waiting for hobbyists. Qwen has become one of the most serious open model bets for agentic coding. Qwen 3.8 27 billion is a compact, dense model with native vision language support, flexible thinking control, and a native context length of 262,000 tokens, extendable up to 1 million. On the official Qwen model card, Qwen 3.8 27 billion posts a 73.0 score on Terminal Bench 2.1. With the Terminus harness, it also reports 61.7 on Sui Bench Pro. Those numbers do not mean you should throw away every premium model tomorrow. They do mean the floor is rising fast, and when the model floor rises, the harness suddenly matters more, because a coding agent is not just a model, it is a loop. Read, plan, edit, run, observe, recover, compress, continue. The model supplies intelligence, but the harness decides how much intelligence gets wasted. A bad harness can make a strong model look clumsy. A good harness can make a cheaper model feel shockingly capable. That is why the Ante plus Qwen combination is worth watching. Ante already lists Qwen 3.8 27 billion as a verified local model. That means the model loads, the chat template resolves, and tool calling works in Ante's loop. The older Qwen 3.6 27 billion has already been fully evolved by Ante on Terminal Bench 2.1. With 56.2% accuracy across 89 tasks and 445 trials, that is not frontier Claude Code. It is also not a toy. It is a 17 GB local download doing real terminal tasks through a lightweight agent. And that is the part people underestimate. Open models do not need to beat the best closed model at every hard problem to change the market. They only need to become good enough for the work you should never have sent to the expensive tool in the first place. The strongest opinion I have here is simple. Most AI coding setups are wasteful because they treat every turn like it deserves the premium stack. That is absurd. Not every agent action is a genius moment. Sometimes the agent is just reading a package file. Sometimes it is searching for a symbol. Sometimes it is opening the same test output for the third time. Sometimes it is rewriting a tiny import. Sometimes it is summarizing a failure that a cheaper model could understand easily. And yet we built a culture where the safest default is to send the whole loop through the most expensive, most comfortable, most locked-in product. That works when you run one agent. It breaks when you want agents to become infrastructure. This is why memory and CPU are not vanity metrics. They decide whether you can run one agent or many. They decide whether a small laptop can keep up. They decide whether a cheap server can host a team workflow. They decide whether an agent runner feels like a normal background process or a machine possession. Claude Code can be brilliant. That is not the argument. The argument is that brilliance is not the only resource. There's also attention, there's local compute, there's disk, there's the weird psychological cost of opening an agent and feeling your whole machine bend around it. That is where a tiny Rust binary becomes more than a nerd trophy. Small changes behavior. When a tool is heavy, you use it carefully. When a tool is light, you use it casually. When it is casual, you run more experiments. When you run more experiments, your workflow changes. You stop asking one agent to do everything perfectly. You start asking several agents to produce competing paths. One tries the obvious fix. One investigates the root cause. One writes a failing test. One checks whether the dependency can be removed. One reviews the entire change as if it did not trust the others. That is not a nicer chatbot. That is a different shape of software development, and that shape only works if the overhead is low enough. This is also why the wall time caveat does not kill the story. Ante took 940 seconds in the resource benchmark. Claude Code took 627. If you're judging only by time to finish one bundle of tasks, Claude Code wins that row. Clearly, there's no need to pretend otherwise, but speed and scalability are not the same thing. A sports car is faster than a delivery van. That does not mean you run a city on sports cars. The moment you need volume, the question changes. How many can you run? What happens when 5 tasks become 50? What happens when every pull request gets 3 agents, not 1? What happens when your team wants agents always working in the background, not just answering when summoned? In that world, the expensive thing is not only seconds, it is capacity. An agent that finishes faster but consumes much more memory can become the bottleneck once you multiply it. An agent that is slower but much lighter can win when the work can be parallelized, queued, or run in the background. And coding work often can, not always. If the production build is broken right now and one person is waiting, use the fastest, reliable tool. But if the job is migration, test generation, dependency cleanup, lint repair, documentation drift, issue triage, or battery factoring, you're in a different game. You care about throughput, you care about how many attempts you can afford, you care about whether failure is cheap. That is where Ante's numbers become dangerous, because the pitch is not replace Claude Code for every developer today. The pitch is stop assuming every agent has to be a heavy premium session. That assumption is going to age badly. The Qwen part makes this feel even more consequential because Qwen is attacking the right layer. Qwen 3.8 27 billion is not trying to be the largest thing on earth, it is trying to be deployable. 27 billion parameters, native multimodal support, long context, agent task benchmarks that are no longer embarrassing, Apache 2.0 licensing. That combination is much more practical than another leaderboard monster that only works if you own a small power plant. And Ante's verified model list is basically a map of where this is going. Qwen 3.827 billion is listed as a 17 gigabyte download with a 256,000 token max context in Ante's selector. Qwen 3.59 billion is listed at 5.7 gigabytes. Devstral Small 2 is 14 gigabytes. Gemma 4 is in the same zone. This is the local agent tier. Not tiny chat demos, not toy autocomplete. Actual coding loops where the machine can read call tools, modify files, and recover from environment feedback. The business implication is brutal. If a free or cheap model can handle half the agent loop, premium coding products have to justify the rest. They cannot just say, our model is better. Better at the hardest part, yes. Better at every boring part, at every price, at every scale, forever. That is a much harder claim, and it is probably false. The future coding agent stack is not one model. It is routing, big model when the decision is dangerous, local model when the task is narrow. Cheap model when the step is mechanical. Review model when the diff needs suspicion. Vision model when the UI actually matters. And a harness that keeps the whole thing from turning into soup. That last part is where Ante is trying to win. It is not saying the model does not matter. It is saying the agent around the model matters more than people admit. I think that is right. There is a second reason the resource claim matters. It makes local AI feel less like a stunt. A lot of local AI content has the same problem. It shows that something can run, but not that you would want to live with it. Yes, the model loads. Yes, it answers a prompt. Yes, it technically wrote a function. Then you ask it to work inside a real repo, and suddenly everything becomes slow, fragile, and weird. The promise of Ante plus Qwen is different. It is not just, can I run a model locally? It is, can I run an agent locally without making the agent framework itself the problem? That distinction matters. A local model already has enough challenges. It needs memory. It needs context management. It needs tool calling that does not break. It needs good prompts. It needs a way to recover when the environment disagrees with its plan. If the agent harness also burns resources casually, the whole stack feels worse than it needs to. Ante's argument is that the harness should be nearly invisible. Small binary, low idle cost, low repeated disk reading, offline mode through local GGOF models, bring your own provider when you do want hosted models. That is a clean thesis. And it is a thesis aimed directly at the anxiety developers have right now. What am I paying for? Where is my code going? Why does the tool need this much access? Why is the bill unpredictable? Why does every agent feel like a subscription trap with a terminal attached? Ante does not solve all of that by itself, but it attacks the right pressure points. Local models attack data movement. Open weights attack dependency on one vendor. A tiny agent core attacks local overhead. Together, they make a much stronger argument than any one of them alone. Now, let us be fair about what this does not prove. It does not prove Ante is more capable than Claude Code across real developer work. It does not prove Qwen 3.8 inside Ante beats Claude Code. It does not prove your personal project will feel better in Ante, and it definitely does not prove every developer should switch today. The resource benchmark is vendor published. That does not make it worthless. The methodology is public enough to discuss. The numbers are detailed enough to interrogate. The wall time row is included. Even though it makes Ante look slower, that is better than a marketing screenshot, but independent reproduction still matters. Also, Qwen 3.8 being verified in Ante is not the same as Qwen 3.8 being fully evaled there. Ante's fully evaled Qwen row is Qwen 3.627 billion at 56.2% on Terminal Bench 2.1. Qwen's own model card reports stronger Qwen 3.8 benchmark numbers, but those are with other harnesses and evaluation setups. Do not mash those together into one fake super benchmark. That is how AI discourse becomes sludge. The honest version is still exciting enough. Qwen is getting much better at agentic coding. Ante is making the agent layer much lighter, and the combination points at a world where local or open model agents can take over more of the everyday loop. That is the real story. Not a clean replacement, not a victory lap. A pressure leak. The premium coding agent stack used to feel like the only serious option. Now pieces of it are being unbundled. The model can be swapped, the harness can be swapped, the memory profile can be measured, the disk cost can be questioned, the agent can run locally, and once developers start asking those questions, the default product has to defend every layer. That is new. The most interesting future is not Ante versus Claude Code. It is Ante driving Claude Code, or Ante driving Codex, or Ante driving Codex, or Ante running Qwen locally for cheap tasks, then handing dangerous work to a frontier model. Ante already has terminal session features designed around durable work. It can run named sessions through tmux. It can attach to terminal agents. It can resume work instead of treating every interaction as a fresh little chat bubble. That matters because multi-agent work is not just more agents, it is coordination. The first agent needs to leave state behind. The second agent needs to inspect what happened. The third agent needs to run verification. The human needs to understand which session is doing what. If that orchestration layer is heavy, the whole dream collapses under its own ceremony. If it is light, it starts to look normal. This is why I think the most boring sentence in the Ante docs is secretly the most important one. Mass parallelism only pays off if a single agent is cheap enough to multiply. That is the thesis. The entire AI coding market has been obsessed with the intelligence of the individual agent. But software teams do not only care about one brilliant action, they care about systems, they care about repeatability, they care about review, they care about background work, they care about cost, they care about whether a tool can be part of a workflow instead of the whole workflow bending around the tool. Claude Code is incredibly good at being the premium assistant in the room. Ante is trying to become the cheap nervous system around the room. That is a different ambition, and if Qwen keeps improving, that ambition gets much more believable. The mistake would be to turn this into tribal nonsense. Claude Code users do not need to be embarrassed. Claude Code is popular for a reason. It feels capable, it handles complicated repos, it has the advantage of tight model and product integration. For many developers, that is worth paying for, but the lazy assumption that premium agent products own the entire future is getting weaker, because the stack is separating. There is the model, there is the agent harness, there is the local runtime. There is the tool permission system, there is the memory system, there is the session manager, there is the evaluation harness, and each layer can now be attacked by a smaller, cheaper, more focused tool. That is how big products get squeezed. Not all at once, piece by piece. First, the cheap model handles summaries, then it handles search, then it handles obvious fixes, then it handles tests, then it handles entire low-risk issues. Then the premium model only gets called when the cheaper layer is unsure. At that point, the premium model is still valuable. But it is not the whole workflow, it is the specialist, and specialists get used differently. This is why the Ante plus Qwen story matters even if you never install Ante. It tells you where AI coding tools are going, toward smaller cores, toward local models, toward routing, toward measured overhead, toward more agents doing narrower jobs, and away from the idea that one expensive black box should be trusted with everything. That is a healthy direction. It makes the tools more inspectable, it makes costs easier to reason about. It gives developers more leverage, and it makes every AI coding product prove what part of the stack is actually worth paying for. So the way I would think about Ante plus Qwen is not as a replacement headline, it is a warning shot. If you're using Claude Code today, the question is not, should I panic and uninstall it? No, the question is, how much of my current agent workflow actually needs something that heavy? If the answer is everything, fine. Pay for the best tool and move on. But if the answer is maybe not the search, maybe not the test reruns, maybe not the cleanup, maybe not the summaries, maybe not the first pass on simple issues, then the whole market starts to look different, because every cheap local agent turn is a premium turn that did not happen. Every lightweight process is another worker you can run. Every bit of overhead removed from the harness makes parallel agents more plausible, and every Qwen release that improves coding, tool use, long context, or multimodal work makes the local tier less ignorable. That is why I think the resource numbers are the hook, but not the whole story. 7 times lower peak memory is the door opening. 9 times lower average CPU is the shape of the workflow behind it. 5 times less disk I/O is proof that agent design can be wasteful in ways developers forgot to measure. But the real question is what happens when good enough models meet tiny agent runtimes. My answer is simple. The premium agent does not disappear, it gets surrounded, it becomes one part of a bigger system. And the boring local worker agents start eating the work around it. That is much more interesting than another Claude Code clone. It is also more threatening, because the tool that replaces part of your workflow rarely announces itself as a revolution. It starts as a cheap thing you use for the boring jobs. Then one day, the boring jobs are half the job.